Infinity Live, everyone. We're here live. Glad to have everybody on board tonight. My name is Robert Groover. We are joined by Michael Varhola. Good evening, Mike.
Evening.
And Richard Balsley. Good evening,
Hi.
Richard. And live from Con on the Cob, we're joined by William Thrasher and
Hello.
Andy Hawk. Good evening, gentlemen.
And our live studio audience.
And our live studio audience, welcome everyone. So tonight is a special night. We got some new news, some information to go on to you guys. I'm going to kick it over to Mike. And Mike, tell us about the new thing that Skirmisher has out that just came out today.
Yeah, a year ago, Will and I were at Con on the Cob with Andy. So exactly 1 year ago today, I was helping with setup at the con. I was the gaming guest of honor at Con on the Cob last year, and as the guest of honor, I thought it became me to actually help with the setup for the show. And one of the ideas that Will and I came up with while we were there was to actually do a book of defects. And defects are a D20/Pathfinder concept that we came out with for our book Nuisances. It was in 2004, actually, that we came out with the concept of defects. And a defect is essentially an anti-feat. Everybody who plays D20 knows what a feat is. A feat is something that plugs into a character and gives a character a special ability. A defect plugs into a character and gives a character a special disability. So, for example, an allergy or a personality disorder. Bitch is one of my favorite personality disorders. We were accused originally of being misogynistic for having feats like bitch or hot flashes. I don't even know what the word misogynistic means. But our book Nuisances was very popular. It had 59 defects, and our new book, The Jester Dragon's Guide to Defects, has 232 defects, I believe. So I've written about half of this book. Will's written about half of the book. A number of other skirmishers have contributed to it. And anyone who's an old school gamer should appreciate what Will Thrasher has done with this cover illustration. I'm going to hold it up next to the first edition Player's Handbook for anyone who isn't old school enough. So, and Will has done more than 30 illustrations in this style for the interior of the book. So as of today, and I'm just going to reveal one more thing about this, and then I'll shut up and let Will talk about it a little. As of today, the Jester Dragon's Guide to Defects is the number 6 hottest small press item on DriveThruRPG.com. It's number 32 of the top 100 items on its main list, and it's number 36 on RPG Now. So it is a top 100 seller on 3 different lists within 18 hours of it coming out. So it is an awesome book. It's a lot of fun. It's good looking. People should check it out.
Yeah, it's a big deal, and we're glad to put it out. I know that you and Will both worked really hard on it. Will, we looked at the cover. We saw the comparison to the old school. You really kind of drew inspiration from that. Did you have other defects in the book, other art in the book that came from the old school like that?
Not all that much. A lot of the artwork that I put together had like references to old comic books, old science fiction, animation from the 90s. There's some actually the illustration for Space Madness is inspired by the Ren and Stimpy episode Space Madness. So it's got an astronaut eating soap in zero gravity,
Nice.
trapped outside the airlock trying to get in.
And that, of course, is the name of the defect. Space Madness is something that you can use in a sci-fi role-playing game.
Yeah, we tried to cover a lot of genres.
Right.
What other kind of defects are there in the book? Can you give us an example of something and how it would be used in a OGL or D20 game?
Well, like one of the more straightforward ones is disfavored enemy. It's the opposite of the Ranger's favorite enemy ability. What you do is like you pick a creature from the favored enemy chart. Only instead of getting a bonus to attacking that creature and tracking that creature, you get a penalty to attacking that creature and tracking that creature, and that's one of the more straightforward ones. One of the crazier ones, actually going back to one of the crazier ones, is a defect called Skyclad. It's for magic users, where your magical style is you work your magic in the nude. And so a character, like it's good for druids, it's good for certain kinds of sorcerers. If you're Skyclad, you cannot prepare spells while wearing clothes. You have to be emotionally naked to prepare spells, but also any clothing gives you a 10% chance of spell failure in addition to any spell failure from armor.
And oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just about to say the Skyclad art was one of my favorite pieces in the whole book. That shows a priestess in complete nude with a cat jumping up, covering all her important parts, so that we can't see it.
Try to cover things up.
And someone might well ask, okay, why would you want to use defects in your game? Well, for one thing, it adds just a fun element that you might not otherwise have in the game. To be able to throw in certain defects. So if a character, for example, does have a phobia of a certain kind of monster, and then he encounters that monster, he's going to react differently to it than his character might otherwise want. So a lot of DMs who are exposed to the concept of defects and check them out say, wait a minute, this is just too much fun to pass up. I'm going to require every character in my party to have at least one defect. And really, it makes the game a little more exciting, it shakes things up. It can make NPCs more quirky or interesting. The whole idea that characters become generic or cookie cutter just gets completely thrown out when you can throw in one of these defects to modify that character. So there's some neat things. But like Will said, all genres, space opera, swords and sorcery, high fantasy, we're really catering to it all.
Yeah, and I've started an online game that starts actually next Thursday, which is going to be aired on my channel here on YouTube. So you'll be able to see a live Dungeons and Dragons game every other week, opposite of this show. But we're using defects in our game. One of the characters chose death, which is an interesting one, and another one chose I forget the name. You could probably tell me, where they have a random alignment each day.
Oh, that's Schizoid.
Yeah, Schizoid, which I found quite interesting.
And you know, some of them are funny. I mean, as a matter of fact, all of them are funny. We've tried to make them all funny. They're all funny or quirky. You can do some neat things with them. But a lot of them are based on real life. I mean, I've probably written up 100 defects based just on things that I've seen. So, for example, one of my favorite is won't look down. And this is based on my experiences with people who actually won't look at the floor, and they'll walk through their own house kicking things that are on the floor. I've seen this. I've seen this happen. I see it on a daily basis, as a matter of fact. So the idea that you would have a character in then a game who won't look down in a world where you've got pressure plates and oozes on the floors and pit traps, it actually is pretty funny once you apply that. So yeah, a lot of them are based on things where I say, oh, okay, that's a funny way to act in real life. How would that play out in a fantasy role-playing game?
Yeah, and even though in my game it's kind of a gritty war drama that happens in a fantasy world, lots of the defects work. So it's not just a single, it's not just a humor type thing. It can be used in a gritty, dark world, or even a funny world, or just even a high fantasy world. So anybody can use these sorts of things.
Well, sure. Some of the defects are just inversions of existing feats. So hesitant gives somebody a -4 to initiative, as opposed to improved initiative, which gives you a +4. So if you have somebody who has super honed reflexes and they get a +4 when they go into a battle, sure, it makes perfect sense that you'd have people who were hesitant when they went into a battle and weren't able to act as quickly. So they are, in fact, very plausible, a lot of them, and really do enhance the realism of the game. To have that character who you can't count on him to take a shot with his bow because you know he is going to hesitate.
And Will, what do a player get for getting a defect? If they take a defect, do they get a bonus?
Yeah, and the rule is when you take a defect, you get a bonus feat. Now, you can't just load up on as many defects as you want, though. You only qualify for the defect and the bonus feat when you, if I remember correctly, when you would otherwise qualify for a bonus feat to begin with. So you get your bonus feat, you could then pick up another defect, and if you did, then you get another bonus feat. And
Yeah, you have to have fewer offsetting bonus feats than you have regular feats, except at first level, where you can have an equal number. And we write all that up in the book. That's all in the book.
And another thing is some of the defects are progressive. Like there's a defect in fat where your character is overweight, but then there's another one, obese. Fat is the prerequisite, and there's a couple of different defects like that where they build as they go.
Right. Yeah, right. Fat and obese. Exactly. Some of my two more of my favorites.
Go ahead, Richard.
One of the ones that I liked was Chew Materials. I mean, not only is the illustration hilarious, but I just like the concept. I mean, it fits in with some of the more taboo like issues of or I guess you could call them taboos for certain types of styles of magic, where like certain things which are otherwise outside the culture, or then used as a source of magic, like in terms of ingesting certain things that you wouldn't otherwise, in order to get the magical power to be able to cast the spell.
Well, and that defect is based on a pun, in a sense. I've always thought the feat eschew materials uses an especially obscure and kind of dumb word. I mean, eschew materials has always seemed like a very odd name for a feat. So that inspired the chew materials. We have a spellcaster who, when he has a material component in his hand, feels compelled to chew on it.
Which could be deadly for something like diamond dust.
Well, right. But mostly it can screw up his casting of the spell and use up his components.
Well, it can be outright unsanitary. If you look at the material components for, I think it's Fireball, it's either like a handful of sulfur or a handful of guano.
Right.
So you can get the Jester's Dragon's Guide to Defects on DriveThruRPG. After the show, we'll have a link down in the underbar. There's the cover right there. You can see the awesome work that Will did. We're really proud of the book, and we're hoping that you guys will go and check it out and pick it up. But now I'd like to introduce Andy Hopp. Good evening, Andy.
Hey,
welcome. Very well, thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us tonight. We know that you and Will are coming live from Con on the Cob, so maybe you could tell us about Con on the Cob and what you guys do there.
Oh, we just have tons of fun, man. There's all kinds of geeky goodness. 4-day celebration of games, art, freaks, and fun. Those things. Games, tons of those. Art, tons of that. Freaks, I don't even need to mention that. Hey, speaking of freaks, does it look to you guys like I've got some kind of glowing devil horns growing out of my head? Because it's pretty awesome. There's this...
It was this elf from the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings. Where
yeah. Well, I think there's a chandelier, and then there's a reflection in the mirror of the chandelier. Well, I don't know, but it looks pretty cool.
No, Andy, I always see the devil horns with you, even when you're not in that particular situation.
I know. So. Dude, you're looking pretty sexy, by the way, Mike.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm probably dressed exactly the same as I was exactly a year ago when I was at Con on the Cob with you as your gaming guest of honor. So I always wear the Skirmisher colors. So wish I could be there this year. Glad I was there last year, and gonna try like hell to be there next year. Because it is one of the most fun cons I have ever done, and that's thanks to you. We need to mention that Andy's not at Con on the Cob. Andy is the founder, organizer, and spirit of Con on the Cob.
Aw, shucks. Thanks, Mike. But, it's obviously I'm going to say something like, oh, it's not me, it's everyone else. But that's actually true. I would just be really lonely if it was just me. But anyway, to answer your question of earlier, we have live comedy music, some awesome movies, parties out the wazoo. In fact, right now I'm 18 minutes late, thanks to the artsy fartsy fancy schmancy champagne meet and greet and artiste soiree is going on upstairs. Ooh, we got this awesome Lisa Steenson from Bustin' Games is here, so we have this kind of redneck theme to it. We got some Vienna sausages on pizza, cheese doodle with fancy stuff and ho-hos. It's going to be awesome. But anyway, I'm sorry you guys can't all be there, but Will be there.
I will make up for the three of you guys.
Yes.
Are you going to get to see your junk again this time?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Can we, Rob, have we got time to each ask Andy one question before he departs for his soiree?
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Well,
You
Andy,
up first.
I wanted to ask you a question that I already know the answer to, but I've always found the answer pretty interesting. You are an artist first, I think. I mean, I think when I interviewed you for D-Infinity magazine last year, I called you artist, author, and impresario, Andy Hopp. But I put artist first for a reason. But you're a fantasy artist, but not a typical fantasy artist. You don't do orcs or hobbits or elves. If you could just talk a little bit to our listeners about your philosophy for fantasy art and why you do the kind of art you do, I would appreciate that.
Well, thanks. That's a great setup. First of all, it's daddy first, then husband, then artist, then other stuff. But anyway, say that because, my kids might see this. But anyway, so my philosophy behind it is I like to draw what I like to do. So there's a million people out there that do dragons and fairies and mermaids and all the, the fancy stuff that everybody loves. But there's really no one else that draws sentient Twinkies and cockroaches and stuff like I do. Which, there are, but not in my my immediate competition, I suppose.
Right.
So I don't know. I enjoy drawing what I do, and I'm just not into that dragons and everything. I mean, they're cool. No ragging on the people that do dragons, but there's a million of them. So if an art director wants to hire someone to draw sentient Twinkies, they would come to me. If they want someone to go to do dragons, they've got 1,000 people to choose from that are all awesome. So
right.
I suppose that's the abridged version of why I do what I do. But the real reason is just it's where my brain goes. I'm much more comfortable making stuff up myself than rehashing stuff that someone else made up.
Yep. Good.
Andy, I've called you a number of times on social media and stuff where we've interacted, the most original guy working in RPGs today, and I stand by that just because of what Mike says. But where does that inspiration come from? I mean, you say you like drawing these things, but there's not many people in this world, I think, who would say, oh, I'm going to draw a Twinkie that's sentient. Where did you get this stuff from, and how do you keep up that originality day in and day out?
That's a really tough question to answer, because the real honest answer is just how my brain works. I can't really say there's some specific influence or anything like that. I've just always tried to be a little different from everybody else because, to be honest, artistically speaking, specific, skills as an artist, I'm sure there are thousands of people out there better than me. So I try to do something different, something that lets me stand out a little bit from everyone else. That maybe technical skills might be better than mine, so I wouldn't stand out in that way. So do something original, creative, and just be myself. And I've been lucky enough that I've been able to work in such a way that I'm able to do my own stuff. Yep.
Richard, did you have a question for Andy?
Yeah, I was wondering how much does language play a role in the creations you come up with? Because I've noticed that there's a lot of play on words and some of the stuff, like Corn Thulu for like the Kickstarter project you did.
Yeah, well, thanks. It plays a huge role in what I do. I don't try to go for the obvious puns. I think Corn Thulu is a little bit obvious, but it was kind of too obvious to ignore, just because we've got Con on the Cob and we wanted to mix Cthulhu and Con on the Cob, so it was either Corn Thulu or Cob Thulu, and then Elder Cob sounded better than Elder Corn, so we did Corn Thulu the Elder Cob. You probably can't see my hands moving around underneath me, but I'm doing like this kind of stuff beneath the level. But yeah, so I use a lot of portmanteau in my writings and a lot of coined terms. I probably make up 1 in 10 of the words I write, but I hope they make sense. Most people seem to think they do. My favorite word I made up recently is delicatrosity, which describes some horrible food that's overly fancy or something. So that's just some. So I hope that answers your question. Maybe it doesn't, but that's what I have.
And Will, you're right there with Andy. What kind of questions do you have for him?
Well, any question I have about or for Andy is going to be answered in the most horrific ways throughout Con on the Cob. But are we going to see the Coblins this year? I know you were trying to get a Coblin costume together.
No.
No.
Unfortunately, that was a Kickstarter that we didn't quite get the funding we needed for. We wanted to make a Coblin. Coblins, by the way, they're from the game Lowlife, which is my role-playing game that I made. And they are sentient giant ears of corn, and they're also the mascots of Con on the Cob. But I tried to get a mascot costume made, like a professional sports-style mascot, and they're like $4,000, and we just didn't raise enough in the Kickstarter to do it. But we'll try again another time. No big deal. It's all good. But we did have some new banners with Coblins on them,
cool,
hanging in on the hallway. Again, I feel really short because I'm doing all this kind of stuff, like pointing over there. There we are. Now your head gets cut off.
Well, I can be this god,
I could
this
go
god
like this.
face.
So anyway, I don't know. It looks like slow motion to me because it's a slow connection. But anyway, you look really bored. Yeah, I don't know. I have nothing else to say on that subject.
So, Andy, can you tell us what you have going on right now? I know you have a Kickstarter happening. Tell us what you have going on and pimp out some of your stuff.
I would love to. Thank you for the opportunity to do so. The coolest thing I've got going on right now is a collaboration with Mr. William Thrasher right here. We haven't 100% decided on the name, but I think it's going to be something along the lines of Playing Dirty, which is a low-life themed live-action role-playing game that Will and I are collaborating on.
Yep.
Redoing the low-life core rulebook for next year. Also a book called Holy Crap, which is about the religions of low-life. And the whole Volume 1, Keister Island, came out today at Con on the Cob. It'll be in stores in February. And we have a line of low-life miniatures coming out next year, 62 miniatures.
Wow.
Stuff, yeah, it's fancy stuff. We're doing an anthology of low-life fiction that's coming out next year. There's another card game that's a card/miniatures game called Low Brawl that's coming out next year. And right now, if I may pimp a project, yes, if you go to Kickstarter and type in Alpha Beast Soup, that's a children's book that I'm doing right now.
Right, yeah. And you've been promoting that on Facebook a lot.
Yes, a lot. Probably more than I should, but I'm trying to back up a little bit.
Not at all. That's what it's for.
I've had trouble, I know how to promote games, but children's books, I don't really know the forum, So any help anyone can give in spreading the word, I'd really appreciate. Also, after that, I have an Alice in Wonderland card game that I'm producing with the guy by the name of Rob Stone that some of you may or may not know. But that's coming out soon. Well, not coming out soon. It's pre-production right now, so it'll be in production. And I feel like I'm babbling.
No, you're good. You're good. This is why we've got you here. That's all great, Andy.
It's all great information.
Later on, I'm probably going to give Will a wedgie. That's playing for later on. I see he's wearing a belt. He's not wearing a belt.
I'm gonna polish.
He's gonna polish my dome. What'd you do? Yeah. So I don't know, guys. This is really cool. I'm really excited about your book of defects. I think that's an awesome one.
Well, we sent you a copy of it. I know you're busy right now. We sent you a PDF copy of it this morning. So that'll be waiting in your email box.
How thoughtful of you guys.
We are pretty generous.
You are, absolutely. And I got to say, one other thing, I was so impressed with the low-life LARP that Will ran at Gen Con. Right afterwards, like, Will, we have to make this as an actual product. And he's running it Saturday at Con on the Cob. So if anyone who was at Con on the Cob is watching this cast right now, come play in it. It's awesome.
We're gonna have a good.
Well, that's really awesome. Andy, we'll have all your links in the underbar on this video for all the things you have going on, including Alpha Beast Soup and all your other projects at Mother Oath Creations. So we're really happy to have had you on, and we thank you a lot. We'll let you get to your parties and all your debauchery that you have going on this evening.
I love you all.
Thanks, Andy.
We love you, Andy.
Shy.
Thanks.
Good luck with the con, brother.
Thanks a lot, guys. Very well.
All right. Will's going to be leaving. He's running a LARP tonight, so Will will be out of here. Will, we thank you as well for setting up the interview.
Did we get any other people? Or?
I don't think so.
Do you guys want to stay on as a studio?
So Will?
I actually looks like we've got. Actually, we're moving on. We're moving on to the topical section, right?
Yes, we are.
Yep.
You want to get some live feedback from the gamer community?
Well, in what way are you trying to arbitrarily disrupt the show just because you can, Will?
I'm saying that we have actual gamers, not just our talking heads, that we can get feedback from like live during the topical part of the show.
Oh, okay, sure. To the extent that you think that's going to be successful and you want to do that, that sounds just fine to me.
I do.
All right, well, my first question for topical material, Will, is just how goddamn weird is it to run a LARP for one person? I mean, is that just like crossing the line out of RPGs and into something completely different?
Well, I'll thank you. It's two people, actually. And, you know, David Mamet once said that if you understand the fundamental nature and structure of drama, you can create a thrilling story out of anything. It does not have to be about the fall of Rome. It can be about who left the water running.
All right.
All you need is 2 people for a conflict.
Good enough. All right, Rob, sorry for hijacking that topical portion of the show, Rob. I'll return control to you at this point.
No problem. So the next thing we're going to talk about tonight is kind of a serious topic, I think. There is a Democratic social worker who lives in Maine. Her name is Colleen Lockowitz. She is running for the state senate in Maine and is also a World of Warcraft player. I play World of Warcraft as well. I'm sure other people in our audience have played WoW and other sorts of MMOs. We're all gamers of different stripes, but her opponents have put out quite a bit of misinformation about what the game is. And the types of things that you do in the game, and it's become silly almost to the point of farce. And I have a couple things that I want to read from these attack ads. If you'll bear with me for just a minute, this will kind of give us an idea of what her opponents are doing. Essentially, Colleen plays an orc rogue on the Horde side of World of Warcraft, and she's part of a guild that is in the Daily Coz forums, which is Daily Coz is kind of a left-leaning blog, and in this blog, in this forum, she's talked a lot about the game and stuff. Like, for instance, in one post, she says, "I'm a level 68 orc rogue girl. That means I stab things a lot. Who would have thought a peace-loving social worker and Democrat would enjoy that?" And in another quote, she says, "Stabbing, it's fun. I never thought I would love it so much either. I did not start out in WoW as a rogue." And her opponents have used this information and created an attack blog for her, where they've laid out all these different things that she said over the years on the forums. And for me personally, being a player and being someone who interacts online, I find it interesting that they're essentially data mining these sites, looking for stuff about her. But even in a broader topic, it seems like to me that the Republican Party of Maine is saying that because she plays games, she's not worthy of being a state senator. And my question for you guys, and I'm going to let each of you have a time with it, but my question for you guys is, does being a gamer stop you from being a politician? The things that you say online with your guild, your friends, is that pertinent to a political party? And I'm going to kick it to you, Mike, first, and hear what you have to say.
Well, I'll say a couple things. One, this is real shades of the late 1980s when certain religious elements tried to suppress Dungeons and Dragons and said that D&D was a form of practicing Satanism. And I had friends who went to church parking lots and burned their players' handbooks in church parking lots because they were members of churches that said D&D was evil. It was dumb then. It's dumb now. And I think it's just mind-boggling and deplorable that we've come to this point. And it's being taken to a whole new level. The whole idea that someone should be disenfranchised, not just for playing a game. Keep in mind, we're talking about games in particular right now, but basically, in a broader sense, we're saying people can be disenfranchised for exercising their First Amendment rights to enjoying whatever media or information they want. In America, we have a constitutional guarantee that of the First Amendment. Freedom of speech extends into freedom of what we read and whatnot. So the whole idea that somebody could be disenfranchised from political office because they of what they choose to read or the games they choose to play, it would be like if a woman got attacked in her home and someone said, well, she read a romance novel, she was promiscuous, she was asking for it. This is just medieval, regressive thinking. So I think that the Republican Party of Maine has played a big card here. They're really doing something that has a lot of precedent and implications attached to it, and they're doing it just to win in this one race. This is very, very disturbing, and I think that gamers need to pay attention to it. People who are interested in freedom of expression or the Constitution need to pay attention to it. And anyone certainly who votes needs to see what is being done in this race for very cynical reasons.
Yeah, those are all. That's a really valid point. I think as Americans, we're all Americans here. Most of our audience is Americans. That we have these rights, and we have the right to speak how we wish. We have the right to play the games that we want. We have this. Will, what are your thoughts on this issue? I know you've read up on it. What do you think about Colleen and her problems up in Maine?
Well, I mean, it's World of Warcraft it's the most widely played MMORPG in the world, if not the most widely played computer game in the world. I think this has the potential that it could galvanize, it could potentially galvanize the World of Warcraft player base on her side for value that might have in this election. Actually, would either of you like to comment on this? Oh, yeah, certainly.
Hello everybody. This last week on the media, they ran a piece about when Upton Sinclair ran for the governorship of California. His opponents would pull bits of his novels and run that in the newspaper as these are things Upton Sinclair said, free love, he's a lunatic, bohemian. And I think the kind of crossover is that it's about these imagined worlds that are very important to imagining political possibilities. But it's also nothing new.
That's a good point. And now introduce yourself, please.
Hi, my name's Beckett. I'm supposed to be cowboy LARPing, but
well, welcome to the show. One of the topics that Richard and I discussed earlier this week was, how this connected with the attacks on the Libyan consulate on 9/11 of this year, and the diplomat Sean Spence, who was also known as Vile Rat in EVE Online, and Richard and I talked about that. There's an interesting connection between these two. Richard, maybe you can discuss that a little and tell us more.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one of those things I thought was kind of disingenuous, because here you are, you have this guy who, doing his job in a foreign country, is slain by terrorists, and somehow he's venerated as a hero, yet this other person who's doing essentially the same thing in a different environment is denigrated for her hobby for practicing essentially the same skills.
Right.
I mean, with the diplomat, he was basically using his skills that he learned, dealing with people and politicking and things like that, and using them in the in-game environment. And she's using the game as a way to not only reach out to other people that she can have fun with and communicate with them and have a broad spectrum of people that she can associate with, but she's also letting off steam in a way that doesn't cause any issues for anybody, in the real world. So, I don't see what the difference is. And, one of the games that I play is Modern Warfare. I mean, I have military training. I know how to shoot a rifle and and all this other stuff, but I don't feel that when I'm playing a game like Modern Warfare that I'm shooting real people. I'm using skills that I've already learned to play a game that's nothing more than a way to let off some steam, and if there's any frustration, I can take it out on people on screen. I'm not actually trying to hurt them. I don't use foul language when I'm playing. I might laugh at, if somebody takes me out. I think it's kind of funny. It's like, oh, I didn't see you there, right? I mean, so I can get involved with the game emotionally from that kind of thing, but I don't feel the need to go out and do anything to anybody.
Right.
So it's really disingenuous that they're taking this approach that somehow this is going to carry over from the game into her life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a real valid point. And all three of us are writers, and to continue on with Beckett's point, they're from all four of us, right? All four of us. I wasn't counting myself, obviously. But to continue Beckett's point, you know, there's all things. Or there you go. There's all things that we've written, whether it be fictional or my political writings or whatever, that somebody could take out of context. They could take a little piece of it, pull it out, and say, "This is what this person believes." And I don't think this is a party issue. You know, I'm left leaning. I think that's pretty obvious. But beyond that, it's both sides do it. Both sides take little chunks of pieces and try to make it a bigger deal. Colleen did release a statement last week. I have a little piece here I'd like to read, just to kind of get her opinion. We did contact Colleen's campaign this week to try to get her on the show. We never received a response back, so we did want to give her the opportunity to discuss the controversy and to come on and discuss her platform, discuss the important points of her story. But since we didn't get that, I do have a statement I'd like to read that she wrote, and quote, "I think it's weird that I'm being targeted for playing online games. Apparently I'm in good company since there are 183 million other Americans who also enjoy online games. What's next? Will I be ostracized for playing Angry Birds or Words with Friends? If so, guilty as charged." She continued, "What's really weird is that the Republicans are going after my hobbies instead of talking about their record while they've been running Augusta for the last 2 years. Instead of talking about what they're doing for Maine people, they're making fun of me for playing video games. Did you know that more people over the age of 50 play video games than under the age of 18? As a gamer, I'm in good company with folks like Jodie Foster, Vin Diesel, Mike Myers, and Robin Williams. Maybe it's the Republican Party that's out of touch." And I think that's a really valid point. That there are lots of people out there, famous people, not famous people, who play games every day, once a week, once a month, enjoy themselves, and can still do their job, do the thing that they've been hired or voted in to do. And I think that's really important and a really important point.
Well, console video games we've had those now in our homes for 30 plus years. That's to say nothing of arcade games, and then before that, pinball machines. I don't think this tactic is all that likely to work, only because I think most people now have had enough experience with video games that they can tell the difference between what goes on in the game and what goes on out of the game. I think the only thing this is only going to galvanize the small percentage of the population that is not video game literate in some way.
Right. Good point.
Like a small group of people that thinks that Grand Theft Auto is an interactive training manual for car theft. It's not. If I hold down the X button, I don't get to take someone's car. It's much more complicated than that.
Well, one of the things from in terms of the role-playing game aspect is like with D&D, alignment. I don't think people walk around in life thinking like people classify as one alignment or another. I know I don't. I don't walk around and like judge if somebody's neutral evil or not. I mean, it's just not what I do.
Man, I do. Oh, man.
There, and I think to go on Mike's earlier point too about religion. I had an experience early on in my life when I was 16. I was a Christian. I went to church every week, twice a week. I went to a youth group on Wednesday. I went to regular church on Sunday school. And one of the youth counselors at the church found out that I played Vampire the Masquerade. I was 16 at the time, and essentially stopped me from entering the church unless I denounced to God that I would no longer play these games because they're evil. And I think that a lot of people have had these experiences, whether it be as direct and overt like I had it, or even subtle from their family and friends. Oh, that's a stupid game. Oh, that's an evil game. And I think this mindset is carried over even into 2012.
Clearly.
So Richard, do you have any other comments about this case?
Well, I just think it's really inane that they tried to use this tactic. I mean, I read the flyer, and if anything, I think it's kind of like the same thing that happened during the last presidential election cycle, where one of the McCain staffers, made the comment about, gamers living in their parents' basement or some such nonsense, and so not being intelligent enough to, really matter. That's extremely insulting, because most of the things that you need to know in order to play a game require you to have some semblance of intelligence. I mean, to understand the rules and, all of the implications of things that aren't stated but are implied. There's a lot of stuff in games that require you to think about what you're actually doing, no matter how simple the game may be.
Right.
And I've actually taught a class on games, and so this was one of the things that I covered. Was I asked people, what do games teach? Looking at various things, to include something as simple as tic-tac-toe. On its surface, it looks like a really stupid game. Especially once you learn that it's set up in such a way that if you know what you're doing, no one can win.
It teaches always go for the corners.
Well, yeah, see, and that's what it's teaching you. It's teaching you the pattern to recognize that some games can be fixed, mathematically speaking. But also, in addition to that, it teaches you cartography. The game is about maps. It's about ownership, because when you put your X or your O in a square, you're telling the other player that you own that space. So it's teaching you something even if it doesn't look like it is.
So beyond this, we know that she's being attacked, not necessarily because she plays games, although that's part of it, but she's being attacked directly for what she said online.
Right.
Is this something that we should worry about as gamers if we have political aspirations?
Clearly.
Mike?
I think it is clearly something that you have to worry about, because that's being demonstrated right now. It's being demonstrated right now. That's something that you have to worry about. But I don't think we should look at this in such a narrow sense. The hook for us discussing this today is because it is gaming oriented, and D Infinity is a gaming publication. But as Americans, or even any non-Americans who are listening, who are interested in freedom of expression or believe in the concept of the First Amendment, this is basically saying, if you exercise your First Amendment right to free speech, you will be punished. You will be punished by being politically disenfranchised. Is this Nazi Germany? Is this the Soviet Union? I mean, it really is amazing. And I think everybody familiar with this, even people, regardless of their beliefs on the political spectrum, really needs to look at this and consider the implications of people having repercussions leveled against them by officialdom for expressing themselves. I've heard right-wing Tea Partiers talking about how our freedoms have been taken away. Really? Very rarely do you see it as clearly as this. I think everybody needs to take pause at this and really question the extreme and absurd end that this could get taken to.
I could.
Oh, go ahead, Beckett. Sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the way that political candidates for any kind of statewide office, they're scrubbed. So, I mean, if you have said anything in a forum, be it gaming related or, knitting, whatever, if it's anything that seems even the littlest bit out of the mainstream, it's going to be pulled out and thrown against you.
Yeah.
It's reflective of our general, political state of, just prepackaged, polished candidates who don't, say anything off script. And this is both parties, where it's you're groomed from when you are first in, college in the Young Democrats or Young Republicans to always be towing a line. And I mean, this is what we have, and to a certain extent, that's what we want. Unfortunately.
Well, I think it goes into a lot of the things with the way people handle the situation, in regards to not only the way the political structure is set up, because, going off of that point, yeah, we kind of do this, to ourselves. We want prepackaged things. We want slick packaging. I mean, look at the way our consumerism is structured. I mean, I'm not saying that, capitalism is bad, but we do have things that are pretty bad in the way that we advertise. I mean, the movie industry, makes a lot of money off of just image. And World of Warcraft is actually rivaling Hollywood in terms of how much it makes. I mean, it's a huge product. And, to sit there and say that some things are okay and some things aren't, it's kind of like I said earlier, disingenuous, and not to repeat myself too much, but it's really one of those kinds of issues. We're really talking about what is okay for people to do, what way can they express themselves, and if we're going to start leveling charges at what people can and can't do, and how that makes them somehow disconnected because they live in a fantasy world for a couple hours a day, then why don't we just ban every book on the planet? Anything that's not anything that's not a non-fiction book, if it's not completely factual, should just be thrown out. I mean, we might as well go back to the Enlightenment when everything was structured in a certain way that the only thing that was of value had to have nothing but pure information.
Hey.
And any deviance from that is bad, because creativity must be stamped out because it's a chaotic element in an otherwise orderly society.
Richard, it goes beyond that. I live in Texas, and I'm not exaggerating because I've researched this out. The school boards down here actually throw out books that do have factual information in them. So it really gets carried to an extreme. The whole idea that just straight information is safe, that isn't true either.
Hey, the number 7 is biased.
Okay, so we're going to move on from this. I think we've covered some really interesting points about this. I'm going to have some information in the underbar about Colleen's campaign. You can read more about her. I'll also put a link to the Attack blog so that you can see what the main Republican Party is doing as well. But we're going to go to our questions and answers section. We have a question from Todd. Todd asks us, what's the worst game you've ever played? And we're going to start with Will. Will, can you tell us about the worst game you've ever played?
I've as long as I've been doing this, I've got a nice backlog of bad gaming experiences.
Right.
I'm gonna bring up one in particular. If you read the Jester Dragon's Guide to Defects, there's a dedications in there, and one of my dedications is to a player called Josh. Who inspired a number of the metagame defects, which are defects that affect players as well as characters. So this is a story about Josh. And there's a reason why myself and several members from my old gaming circles back in Norfolk, Virginia call him this. If you've had to put up with him for more than an hour in a game, you will eventually get Josh. So here's the deal. Without going into too much background, we were playing an urban fantasy game, and we were sort of these magical street level investigators that dealt with spirits and things and whatnot. And the whole plot line was, it took place in New York. Someone was abducting children off the streets of New York, and it was all just healthy kids from middle class backgrounds. Beyond that, there wasn't quite a pattern, and we were trying to figure out who was behind the kidnappings, whether it was all we knew was that it had some sort of occult reason for this. So we're looking around, and we find out that they're organized and that there's this kind of kidnapping ring, and we find this nightclub promoter who basically, the people who are doing the kidnappings, they're using this, for whatever reason, they're using this guy's nightclub as a front. The kidnappers pick up a kid, deliver him to this storage room in the back of the nightclub, and the nightclub promoter makes sure the kid stays there until a different group of people comes to pick the kid up and take him to wherever. And it's this whole cell structure, so they're difficult to track. So the short of it, there's about 3 Josh stories that get me to the one I want to talk about. I'm going to skip those. So anyway, our group kidnap the nightclub promoter and take him back to one of our characters' houses, which is kind of being used as the base of operation. And now keep in mind, we have occult powers, things to influence emotions and kind of mess with people's minds. So I figured, well, we'll just kind of figure out the right combination of powers and abilities and the right questions to get the information we want. But Josh and one of the other players immediately, forget the powers, they leap directly to torture. And they start brutalizing this nightclub promoter. And you know, this and the thing is, they're almost gleeful with their description of what they were doing to this man. And as this goes on, it becomes apparent that this guy is just an anonymous cog in part of a larger occult conspiracy. All he knows is who pays him huge kickbacks to do this. But you know, Josh and this other guy, like, no, he's got to know more. He's got to know more. There's no way that's all he knows. And they're just doing increasingly terrible things to him. And until finally, the other two, me and the other players, are like, this is clearly all he knows. Let's just erase his memory and throw him out on the street. No, he has to know more. His one contact can't be all he knows. And finally, Hector, a good friend of mine, the GM, out of character, just flat out tells them, Josh, as the GM, I'm telling you, he does not know anymore. Stop trying to roleplay this torture scene. And he goes, no, Hector, he has to know more. There is no way he could only know this one thing. So this is what finally did it. Josh his character pulls out a gun. Is it, you going to tell us more? I don't know anymore. Hector, I shoot him through the kneecap. You going to tell us any more? I don't know anymore. Hector, I shoot him through the other cap. Are you going to tell us any more? I don't know anymore. And I'm like, okay, you've shot him through his kneecaps. There's nothing else you can do. No, there's not. I have a healing spell. Heals both of his kneecaps, does it again. Are you going to tell any more? No. He heals both of his kneecaps, does it again. Finally, Hector says, okay, guys, turns out this guy had an undiagnosed congenital heart defect. He dies due to the intense physical stress. And you know it, Josh tries to find a way to justify undoing a massive coronary with a combination of magic and first aid so this can keep going. And Hector just put his foot down. No, that's impossible. That power doesn't fix heart attacks. And this wasted like an hour plus of game time. It made everyone very uncomfortable and angry.
Yikes.
So yeah, that's one of my worst gaming experiences.
Wow, it sounds like he was just more interested in torture porn than you know, in moving on with the plot of the game.
He's like that. He would fixate on one little thing and never let it go. One day I'll tell you about the sleeping box.
I'll look forward to that. My worst game, my worst game is with passive players, and I think we've all experienced this as DMs, is when you have a person in your game who just sits there like alone. And I had a whole group like that one time where you try to bring them out of their shell a little bit, and every time you bring them out, they fall farther back in. And I think that as a DM, that's like the hardest thing to deal with. With one person, they kind of move off to the side, and you have other people that are helping you with the plot and move forward on the plot. But when you have a whole group like that, it makes it extremely difficult for anyone to have fun. What about you, Mike? What's your worst game?
Well, when I read the question, I read it as the worst game, like worst game system or worst actual game I've ever played. So I can either answer it in terms of that or worst game session. You tell me which you want me to address it from.
Well, how about you do something different and tell us about the worst game you've played?
All right, well, like Will, I could actually give a worst ever story every time we have the show. So I've got a whole repertoire of these, so I'll just pick one. Yeah, back in the early 80s when I was in junior high, a lot of us were, into a lot of paramilitary stuff. So we were interested in games where we could recreate like a military experience. So we played D&D. I started playing D&D in 1982. But there was a game, and it was, let me check real quick, I believe it was Fantasy Games Unlimited. Produced a game in 1981, and I must have played it in 82 or 83, called Merc. And this is really a terrible game. I think they've re-released it sometime in the 31 years since they came out with it. But essentially, it was a mechanics-free game. So they promoted it as this game where you can play a mercenary in the Congo, or you can return to Vietnam. So it was this mercenary role-playing game. Oh my God, this is so cool, a mercenary role-playing game. But there were no rules. There were no rules. There's this thin, little, tiny, mechanics-free rule book. So basically, you could have played Lollipop Man in Candyland. You could have played Frodo the Hobbit. You could have played anything at all with these rules. There were almost no rules at all, and there were these descriptions. You can be a point man. Point men aren't necessarily very smart, but they can take more than one slug. Okay? There's no mechanics attached to any of this. Oh, look, you can be the radio commo guy. You can be the commander. You can be the medic. No mechanics. No mechanics or rules governing any of this. So basically, they could have marketed this game as anything they wanted because there were no rules governing any of the things that they marketed. There were a few gimmicks in the game, like some plastic overlays, one that had like a sniper's sight on it, and somehow you would use that for shooting people if you were a sniper, and I think they had some like for blast radiuses. Basically, they had a game that marketed you being an international mercenary that had 2 pieces of cellophane with layouts marked on them and a few buzzwords that you had to make up the rules to go with. Terrible. Absolutely deplorable. Box set game, but certainly it ranks as one of the worst games that we really gave up on. We played a couple sessions with it, and then we just said, well, this is pointless. So I'd probably enjoy it more now because I would just make up a whole set of rules to go with it. And I'd feel really hosed because they would assert their ownership of the game. Yeah, I would say that was one of the worst games that I ever played because it was in fact not a game at all.
What about you, Richard? What has been your worst game?
There's only one game that comes to mind, and I'm sorry because I really like Gary, and all of the work that he's done over the years. But I tried to run Cyborg Commando. And I don't know if any of you have ever seen the rules for Cyborg Commando, but it was
about it.
Oh, it was the worst game I've ever seen, and it was kind of surprising that Gary Gygax, tried to actually put this out there. It used a mechanic called D10X, which was you roll 2 10-sided dice and you multiply the results together. So it had this interesting curve, and it was mind-boggling, just the fact that this was supposed to work as a system because, basically the concept is that Earth has been invaded by an alien species called the Xenoborgs, Xenoborgs, and they look like giant ticks with lasers, and so they're mechanical, and there's spaceships, and that you can eventually go and try to raid those and stuff like that, and even their ships have giant tentacles. They look like insects or like giant amoebas or some such. Anyway, the rules, the way they're written, are so strange that it makes no sense. I mean, the skills list is 2 full pages, 3-column pages that list all these different skills, to include domestic entertainment skills, which included sex as a skill. But there's no description as to what these things do. I mean, I'm sure it's pretty obvious what kind of skill sex is, but I mean, there were some that were diplomacy and criminal justice and all these other things. The Earth is pretty much screwed. Why would a character want to know how to do anything, for legal proceedings, right?
Well, they must have had a job before the aliens invaded.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all it would be good for is background. But most of the skills actually fell into these categories that included a category of background skills, but the law enforcement ones weren't. And so, what's left of humanity is mostly centered around military bases that have survived,
and a few paralegals thrown in there.
Yeah, so it's kind of strange, but some of the mechanics were just so backwards it didn't make any sense. You didn't have enough power to do anything. literally you had to keep track of how much energy you had to use to move, to shoot, to do all of these things. And the end result was that cyborgs would run out of energy well before they could actually kill any of the aliens they were facing. And this was supposed to work and make sense. And so, I thought it was kind of an interesting idea, but it was poorly executed, and I only tried to run the game once because it was just unbelievably cryptic how it was supposed to work. I mean, the charts that showed like the curve for how the dice mechanic was supposed to work didn't do much of anything. I mean, you gained skill points in such a way that it kind of worked with the scale, but once you hit a certain point, like diminishing returns and everything, it wasn't worth it. Kind of like most modern games do the same thing now. But for this particular game, because of the way the mechanics were structured, you really couldn't do much of anything if you wanted to. So I tried to run it once. Nobody liked it. It sits in the shelf, and I have it as an example of what not to do, which includes a section of mathematical equations using triple integers at the end of the book to explain how certain types of technology work, but they have no purpose other than to have serve as filler. I mean, you literally are stuck with a bunch of calculus formulas at the back of the Game Master's book, and they don't serve any function other than to tell you this is what this technology or theory is supposed to do.
And Will, note to selves, include Xenoboards in the Jester Dragon's Guide to Monsters.
I think we have to do that.
We need to get the Xenoboards in there. Laser firing ticks. Will, we got to do it.
I can draw that.
The setting itself sounds great. I think something like that would be awesome to play like in a OGL or G20 system or Pathfinder.
It's too narrow. It's too narrow for it to be the basis for a game. I think any game that is tied to such a specific setting is ultimately doomed because it's going to be good for 2 or 3 sessions, and then everyone's going to be... The players are all going to want to do something that the game doesn't accommodate.
Yeah, there's actually a couple things that happened with it, in that they only put out the first box set. It was supposed to be a trilogy that was supposed to explain the story and expand upon the world. I mean, but the mechanics itself didn't really serve as a way to really move anything forward, and I think that's really what ultimately hurt the game in the long run.
Yeah.
Well, if do any of you guys in our audience have any worst game stories or experiences?
Yeah, too many to...
None that stand out? Or?
Yeah, it's all blur.
So that's going to do it for us tonight. We're gonna do our last word here. So Will, live from Con on the Cob, what is your last word for this evening, sir?
The last word is get to Con on the Cob. Play in my events, play in Andy's events, play in Sean Patrick's events. All the events we've got going on. We're going to be doing 2 Cthulhu Live events, the Return of Cyrus Crane and Yarlath Hotep and Miss Jones, which
Awesome.
takes place in the 70s on the set of the greatest pornographic film ever made. We're gonna have a Fading Sun's Passion Play event. We're also gonna have another run of Low Life Not for Profit, the first Low Life LARP, the one that Andy and I have been developing under the title of Playing Dirty.
And where is Con on the Cob? Nobody has bothered to mention that.
Hudson, Ohio.
What?
Hudson, Ohio, in the Clarion Hotel.
Awesome.
My last word for tonight is to wish Colleen Lakowitz good luck in her state senate race. I think that any time that gamers are attacked on either side, that the community needs to stand up and support these people. So I wish her luck and hope that she has great success in November. Richard, what's your last word for this evening?
Keep gaming. I mean that's the only thing you can do. I mean, it's kind of like, after the things that happened with 9/11, they said just keep going on about your business and try not to let it affect you. The best way to handle this kind of situation is, in addition to supporting somebody like this candidate, is to keep doing what it is that you do and enjoy, regardless of what anybody tells you.
And Mike, your last word for this evening?
My last word is just to make sure that all our listeners know that this show is the live corollary, the live tie-in to D Infinity, which is a multi-publisher, multi-platform gaming supplement. And what makes it interesting and not a house organ for any one company is that it is, in fact, published by several different companies, and it supports many different game systems. And I just want to give a quick shout out to the co-publishers of D-Infinity, which are Armorcast, Dagon Industries, Dark Threads, Flying Buffalo, Mind Game Productions, Off-World Designs, who provided our beautiful shirts that Will and I are wearing this evening, Skirmisher Publishing LLC, and the United States Marine Space Corps. So all those companies collaborate to produce D-Infinity magazine and the show.
Mike, you forgot a very important one, Andy Hopp and Mother Oith Creations.
And apparently, as of today, Andy Hopp and Mother Oith Creations. Excellent, Will. Good work.
So that's going to do it for us tonight. We're going to be back here live at 8 p.m. on October 25th. That's a Thursday night. So come back and join us. We're going to have Mac McLaughlin from the USMC, who's thank you. I always screw that up. Love live television. So we'll be back on the 25th with Mac McLaughlin. We're going to be talking about horror. We're going to be talking about scary stuff. It's going to be our Halloween episode. So make sure and join us. On behalf of Will Thrasher live at Con on the Cob, Richard Balsley, Michael Varhola, I am Robert Groover. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Good night.
Night, out here.